My parents wanted to take me to the forest and abandon me, but I got my revenge. You won't believe what I did. But let me start from the beginning. I'm a 30-year-old guy who grew up in a house that felt more like a military training camp, with my dad acting like a drill sergeant obsessed with his prized recruit, my younger brother, Logan, who's 28 now. That kid could do no wrong from the minute he was born. Dad treated him like some kind of divine blessing, while I got the "you're a disappointment" treatment every single day. My dad was the type who thought screaming fixed everything, and his answer to any problem, whether it was a broken arm or depression, was to man up. Mom wasn't much better. She always had Logan's back, making excuses for him. Logan's just sensitive. Logan needs extra support. Meanwhile, I couldn't even get a ride to school when it was pouring rain. One time, I had to walk 2 miles through a thunderstorm because Mom was too busy chauffeuring Logan to soccer practice. Ended up with pneumonia, and Dad still called me weak for missing school. And Logan? That little shit knew exactly how to play the game. The second our parents weren't looking, he'd break my stuff and pin it on me. When I was 14, he deleted my entire essay off the family computer the night before it was due. I tried explaining it to my teacher, but she just slapped me with detention for making excuses. Another time, after weeks of mowing lawns to save up $120, I found the cash missing. Turns out Logan had stolen it. When I confronted him, after finding the empty box in his room, he ran straight to Mom, bawling about how I'd invaded his privacy and accused him of stealing. Mom did a half-assed search of his room but somehow didn't notice the brand new video game he'd bought with my money. The favoritism was so obvious it was almost a joke. The only one who really saw what was happening was my older sister, Emma, who's 31 now. She was smart enough to keep her head down. Sometimes at dinner, she'd just look at me when Dad was chewing me out over something ridiculous, like not mowing the lawn in perfect diagonal lines. She knew it was screwed up, but honestly, I don't blame her for not stepping in. Dad had a way of making people regret standing up to him. His whole philosophy on raising real men basically boiled down to treating me like dirt while letting Logan coast through life. Like when I was 14, and he made me rebuild the entire deck in the middle of summer. Meanwhile, Logan got to lounge inside playing video games with the AC blasting. I passed out from heat exhaustion, and Dad's solution? Dump a bucket of water on me and tell me to get back to work. Good times. School was my escape. I was actually pretty good at it, especially math and science. My teachers kept telling me I had potential, but Dad couldn't care less. The only time he even acknowledged my grades was when I got a C+. That was enough for a whole speech about how I was embarrassing the family name. Meanwhile, Logan was barely scraping by with CS and BS, but Dad still acted like he was some academic prodigy whenever he got a B-. When I turned 18, things somehow got even worse. Out of nowhere, Dad announced I had to start paying rent, $600 a month, plus utilities and groceries. Logan? Didn't owe a dime. Didn't even have to lift a damn finger around the house. Dad's excuse? Logan's focusing on his football scholarship. Like I wasn't busting my ass at school too. So there I was, trying to finish my senior year while juggling 2 jobs. Pulled 30 to 35 hours a week on top of classes. My grades tanked, I was running on 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night, and the migraines were brutal. Dad's reaction? You're just being weak. Toughen up. By graduation, I was barely functioning. Dropped 20 pounds, had dark circles under my eyes like I'd gone a few rounds in a boxing ring. Mom acted worried sometimes, but only when Dad wasn't around. Never actually did anything to help, though. Logan, of course, just smirked whenever Dad ragged on me for not pulling my weight, even though I was literally paying bills. Emma would slip me an energy drink now and then or cover one of my chores, but she was heading off to college and had her own life to worry about. The worst part wasn't even the exhaustion. It was knowing that no matter how hard I worked, it would never be enough. Logan could fart the national anthem and get praised for his musical talent, but I could work myself into the ground and still be the family failure. One time, I fixed Dad's truck when the alternator died. Spent my entire Saturday working on it, skinned my knuckles raw, got covered in grease, but I got it running. Dad's response? Took you long enough. Not even a damn thank you. Next day, Logan took out the trash, and I kid you not, Dad acted like he was witnessing the birth of a responsible man. The double standard was insane. Then came the last straw. 2 months after graduation, we had a blowout so bad it should have been my sign to get the hell out. I just finished a double shift at the diner, came home dead on my feet around midnight. All I wanted was to crash for a few hours before my morning shift. Walked into my room and found Logan wearing my only good pair of work boots, tracking mud all over my floor. They weren't anything fancy, but they'd cost me a full day's pay, and they were the only ones that didn't wreck my feet during 8-hour shifts. I was pissed, but too exhausted for a fight, so I just told him to take them off and clean them. Instead, the little bastard smirked and deliberately stomped in a puddle he'd already made on my floor. That's when I snapped. Started yelling at him. Dad must have heard, because he stormed in like I was strangling his precious golden boy. Didn't even ask what happened. Just launched into a rant about respecting my brother's space, in my own damn room, and how I needed to shut up and control my anger. Tried explaining that these were my work boots, that I needed them for my shift tomorrow. Dad's response? Grabbed them and tossed them in the trash. Like I could just magically pull another pair out of thin air after giving him most of my paychecks for rent. That's when I finally lost it. I told him exactly what I thought of his parenting. That he was a pathetic excuse for a father who got off on tearing me down while spoiling Logan rotten. Let everything out. Told him straight up that Logan was turning into a useless leech because of him. Probably should have seen what was coming next. Dad got right up in my face, veins bulging in his forehead, daring me to do something about it, like he wanted me to take the first swing. I didn't bite, but it didn't make a difference. Dear old Dad decided it was time I learned a little respect. Because nothing screams healthy family dynamic quite like a father beating the hell out of his grown son over a pair of boots, right? He knocked me around the living room pretty good. Meanwhile, Mom just scooped up Logan and took him to another room, making sure he didn't have to see it. God forbid the golden child caught a glimpse of Dad's temper in full swing. I got out of there with a bloody nose, a split lip, and what would eventually turn into an impressive black eye. Then, about a week later, something weird happened. Dad's whole attitude shifted. He wasn't exactly nice, but he was noticeably less of a jerk than usual. Out of nowhere, he bought me a new pair of work boots without saying a word about our fight. He even started asking about my jobs. At one point, he actually complimented me when I fixed the leaky bathroom faucet. Should have known something was off. A leopard doesn't change its spots, and my dad? He was a leopard with a temper problem and a receding hairline. But when you've spent your whole life chasing your father's approval, even the smallest scrap of kindness feels like a feast. So I let myself believe it. Maybe getting my ass kicked had been some kind of twisted turning point. Then, one Friday, he hit me with this big plan, a father-son fishing trip. Just the two of us, man to man. He said he'd noticed how hard I was working and wanted to reconnect before I moved on with my life. And I'll admit it, some part of me actually believed him. When you grow up with a guy like that, there's always this stupid little voice whispering, maybe this time will be different. So I did something I never did, I called in sick to both jobs. We loaded up his truck and set out for some lake about 3 hours from home. For a minute, I thought I was about to get some kind of Dr. Phil heart-to-heart. But man, was I wrong. The whole drive, he was normal. He barely spoke, and I figured he was just trying to gather his thoughts. I mean, it had to be tough playing the role of a good dad after beating the crap out of me, right? So I gave him space. Then we stopped for gas, some middle-of-nowhere station surrounded by nothing but trees. As soon as he put the truck in park, the mask dropped. Just like that, the fake, good dad act was gone. His face twisted back into the cold contempt I knew too well. Before I could even ask what was going on, he reached over, yanked open my door, and shoved me straight out of the truck. I hit the gravel hard, stunned. Then, as if to add insult to injury, he tossed my empty water bottle at me. Time to man up for real, he sneered. If you're tough enough to talk back to me, let's see if you're tough enough to find your own way home. Consider this your graduation present. Freedom from the family you're so ungrateful for. Then he laughed. Actually laughed. Maybe out here, you'll finally grow a pair. Since nothing I've done has worked. Don't bother coming back until you do. And just like that, he gunned the engine, kicking up a cloud of dust as he peeled out of the parking lot. I sat there on the ground, watching his truck disappear. My wallet, my phone, hell, everything I had, was still in my backpack, which was still in his truck. That's when it hit me. This whole trip had never been about bonding. He hadn't wanted to fix things. He just wanted to break me one last time. The gas station wasn't even a real station, just a couple of pumps with card readers. No store. No attendant. Just miles of trees and an empty stretch of road in both directions. Once the shock wore off, I checked my pockets. $17 in cash, a stick of gum, and some lint. No phone, no ID, no water, except the empty bottle he'd chucked at me. Not exactly the best survival kit. And the temperature was starting to drop. It was mid-September, warm during the day, but nights in this part of the state got cold fast. I stood there for a while, staring down the road, trying to figure out which way might lead back to civilization. Started walking, sticking my thumb out whenever I heard a car. But traffic was damn near non-existent, maybe one car every half hour, and none of them stopped. And honestly, I couldn't blame them. Some scruffy-looking guy with a black eye, stranded on the side of a deserted road? Not exactly the picture of a safe ride. After a couple of hours, my feet were already killing me. Blisters had started forming, and that familiar raw spot on my heels was only getting worse. The sun was sinking, and I was beginning to face a grim reality. I might have to spend the night out here. And that? That scared the hell out of me. Then, through the trees, I spotted something, a tiny convenience store about half a mile down the road, attached to what looked like someone's house. The whole thing had that creepy, straight out of a horror movie vibe, but at that point, I wasn't in a position to be picky. The old guy behind the counter gave me a long look as I walked in. I probably looked half dead, dust-covered, bruised, exhausted. My face was still a mess from my dad's little lesson. So I made up some BS story about how my buddies had pulled a prank on me during a camping trip and left me behind. No idea if he bought it, but he let me use the store phone. First, I tried calling home. Mom picked up. And I'll never forget what she said. I started explaining what had happened, thinking she'd be shocked or worried. That she'd at least act like a normal mother. Instead, she immediately got defensive. Said Dad had already called and told her everything, how I'd thrown a tantrum when he asked me to help unload the truck, how I needed to learn some respect and be a man. Total fiction. But she ate it up. When I tried to tell her the truth, she just shut me down. Said I needed to figure it out on my own. That I was old enough to handle myself. And then she hung up. That's when the full weight of it hit me. They weren't worried. They weren't mad at him. They were completely fine with this. They had planned it. Together. I was never the son they wanted. So they threw me away. The old man behind the counter gave me a look, pity, maybe, but I had to keep it together. I thought about calling Emma, but I knew she couldn't do much, and I didn't want to drag her into this mess. So I called the only person I knew would actually help. My Uncle Tom. Dad's brother. They hadn't spoken in years, mostly because Uncle Tom had always been the only one willing to call Dad out on his bullshit. Uncle Tom had always tried to stay in touch with me, but Dad made sure it was difficult. Still, I had his number memorized. When I called, he picked up on the third ring, and I just laid everything out, the fight, the gas station, being stranded, all of it. There was a long pause before he said, "Stay put. I'm coming." The store owner let me hang around until Uncle Tom arrived, even gave me a Gatorade and a sandwich on the house. When his beat-up Ford finally pulled into the parking lot close to midnight, he took one look at me and didn't ask a single question. Just gave a small nod and opened the passenger door. The ride back was mostly silent. At one point, he asked if I needed a doctor. I told him no. Then he asked if I wanted to talk about it. I told him not yet. That was the end of the conversation, and honestly, it was the most comfortable silence I'd ever had. About halfway home, I finally asked the question that had been eating at me. "Did you know? About Dad, I mean. Did you know he was like this?" Tom sighed. "Always knew he was an ass. Didn't think he'd go this far. Then after a pause, he added, "Your dad was always jealous of anyone who didn't worship the ground he walked on." We drove the rest of the way to his place without another word. He lived in a small house about 2 hours from my parents'. When we got there, he led me to the spare room, more of an office with a pull-out couch, and said we'd figure things out in the morning. As I was about to collapse from exhaustion, Tom paused at the door. "Your dad didn't know what to do with a son who could think for himself. That's his failure, not yours." Then he left me alone, and I slept for 14 straight hours, the first real sleep I'd had in months. That first week at Uncle Tom's was weird. Every time my phone rang, I half expected it to be my mom, finally checking if I was okay. But the call never came. The only family member who reached out was Emma, and even then, her texts were cautious, like she was afraid someone would see them. Turns out my parents had fed her some bullshit story about me running away after a fight with Dad and how they were giving me space. Right. More like they were covering their asses in case anyone asked questions. Tom wasn't one for pity parties. The day after I arrived, he took me to get a new ID since my old one was still in the backpack my dad drove off with. Had to jump through a ridiculous number of hoops to prove I existed without any documentation. Then we set up a new bank account, one my parents couldn't touch. By the third day, Tom was driving me back to both my jobs to collect my last paychecks. That was awkward. I had to explain to my managers why I'd disappeared and wouldn't be coming back. Through it all, Tom never made me feel like a burden. He wasn't the warm and fuzzy type, but he made space for me in his life without question. Never asked how long I planned to stay or reminded me I was sleeping in his office. Just handled things with this quiet efficiency I respected more than I could say. About a week in, he mentioned there was an opening at the factory where he worked. Nothing fancy, just moving heavy stuff around a warehouse all day. But it paid $15 an hour with benefits, nearly double what I made at the diner, and there were no annoying customers to deal with. I jumped at the chance. The interview was a joke. The manager was an old buddy of Tom's, and it was clear I had the job before I even walked in. Still had to do the paperwork, but by the end of the week, I was officially employed. That first shift? Brutal. I thought I was in decent shape from all the manual labor I'd done before, but this was different. 10 hours of lifting, carrying, and stacking in a warehouse with crap ventilation. By lunch, my shirt was drenched in sweat. By the time I clocked out, my back felt like someone had worked it over with a baseball bat. Tom tossed me a pair of work gloves when we got home and said, "Tomorrow will be worse. Soreness takes a day to kick in." He wasn't wrong. But weirdly enough, even though the job was physically demanding, it was less stressful than my old life. The older guys at the factory didn't treat me like crap. If I struggled with something, they'd step in and show me a better way instead of calling me weak or stupid. And the pay was solid. After taxes, I was making enough to start saving, even after insisting on paying Tom rent. He tried to refuse, but I wasn't about to be a freeloader like my brother. Speaking of Logan, I heard through Emma that he'd totaled Dad's truck about 2 weeks after they dumped me. Drunk driving. Wrapped it around a tree. Somehow walked away without a scratch. And somehow, my parents weren't even mad. Dad just fixed the truck, and Logan faced zero consequences. Classic. 3 months into factory work, I'd saved enough to buy a beater car off one of the guys at work. It had 200,000 miles, no AC, and a radio that only picked up 2 stations. But it was mine. First thing I ever owned outright. Tom helped me fix it up on weekends, teaching me basic maintenance, how to change the oil, replace brake pads, all the stuff my dad never bothered with. By 6 months, I was apartment hunting. Found a tiny studio above a laundromat about 10 minutes from the factory. The constant hum of washing machines took some getting used to, and the whole place smelled like fabric softener, but the rent was cheap. I moved in with just a mattress, a folding chair, and a couple of dishes. Bare bones, but it was mine. The next year was all about the grind. Work. Save. Slowly upgrade my place. Started hitting the gym to build up strength for work, not to get ripped, just to make the job easier. Between that and hauling heavy stuff all day, I put on about 20 pounds of muscle. Wasn't scrawny anymore, that's for sure. Tom and I fell into this routine where I'd go over on Sundays. We'd watch whatever game was on, fix stuff around his place, or just sit and have a beer. He wasn't big on heart-to-hearts, but every now and then, he'd drop a piece of wisdom that stuck with me. My sister was off at college, which, honestly, was a good thing. It meant she didn't have to deal with our parents nearly as much. She'd call about once a week, and we'd catch up. She'd update me on all the family gossip, like how Logan was failing out of community college but somehow convinced himself it was the professor's fault, or how Dad's contracting business was circling the drain, yet he was too stubborn to make any changes. I listened, but it all felt distant, like she was talking about some old TV show I used to watch but wasn't invested in anymore. Around the 1-year mark of living on my own, I got a promotion at the factory. Moved up to machine operator, better pay, less backbreaking work, and more technical skills required. There were a ton of regulations to learn, but that kind of thing came naturally to me. Funny thing, though, the biggest change that first year wasn't my job or my apartment. It was the realization that all the crap my dad drilled into my head about me being weak or a failure? Total bullshit. Turns out, when you're not constantly being undermined by the people who are supposed to have your back, you can actually do pretty well for yourself. Who would have thought? By the time I was 24, I had worked my way up to shift supervisor at the factory. That promotion came with a solid pay raise and a whole lot more responsibility. Suddenly, I was handling scheduling, quality control, and making sure production targets were met. Had a crew of about 15 guys under me, some twice my age, which made things a little awkward at first, especially with a few who still saw me as Tom's nephew. Around then, I also started taking night classes at the community college, working toward a degree in business management. Factory work paid decently, but I wasn't about to grind my body into dust like I'd seen happen to the older guys. Men in their 50s walked around with wrecked backs, hearing problems, and joints so shot they could barely get through a shift. No way was I signing up for that. Balancing school with 50-plus hour workweeks was tough, but compared to dealing with my dad's constant put-downs? A breeze. For the first time in my life, I was getting straight A's. Meanwhile, Emma kept me updated on the ongoing circus that was our family. Depending on how you looked at it, things were either getting more entertaining or more tragic. Dad's business was in a full nosedive. Turns out, treating employees and customers like garbage has consequences. He'd lost some big contracts and was scrambling to stay afloat. Mom, for the first time in her life, had to get a part-time job. Naturally, she complained about it non-stop. But the real star of the disaster was Logan. My golden boy brother had fully embraced his destiny as a complete and utter screw-up. After dropping out of community college, he bounced between dead-end jobs, never lasting more than a few months anywhere. By 22, he had 3 DUIs, lost his license, and was completely dependent on our parents to drive him around. According to Emma, he'd also developed a pretty serious pill habit, not that our parents would ever admit it. Every time he got himself into trouble, they made excuses. Fired for showing up late all the time? His boss had it out for him. Arrested for driving with a suspended license? The cop was just being unfair. Failed a drug test for a warehouse job? Clearly, the test was wrong. The level of denial was downright impressive. By 26, I was the operations manager at the factory, running 3 shifts and handling the day-to-day operations. The owners, who were in their 60s, were looking to slow down, so they were more than happy to hand off responsibility to someone they trusted. I had my own office. My studio apartment had been upgraded to a nice 2-bedroom. I'd swapped out my old Honda for a brand new Tacoma. Even had real furniture, stuff that didn't come from Goodwill. At this point, Uncle Tom was the only family I really considered family. We still had our Sunday tradition, and no matter how much I tried to repay him for everything he'd done for me, he always brushed it off. Family doesn't keep score, he'd say. That hit hard, considering my actual parents had spent my whole life doing nothing but keeping score. Emma had graduated by then, landed a marketing job about an hour away. She didn't move in with me or anything, but we met up for dinner every couple of weeks. It was great seeing her build a life on her own, away from the toxicity of our parents. She still talked to them, but at a safe distance, what she called her sanity buffer. Then, at 28, I took the biggest gamble of my life. The factory owners mentioned they were thinking about selling the business and retiring. I spent weeks crunching numbers, meeting with the bank, and eventually, I made them an offer. I couldn't afford to buy the whole operation outright, but I put together a partnership deal that would give me a path to majority ownership. They took it. Partly because they knew I could keep the place running, and partly because training a new operations manager would have been a massive headache for them. 2 months of paperwork later, I officially owned 30% of the company where I'd once been the guy loading trucks. First thing I did? Put Uncle Tom on the payroll as a senior consultant with a fat salary. The man had spent 40 years breaking his back, he deserved better. Of course, he tried to turn it down, said he didn't need charity. I told him it wasn't charity, it was smart business to keep his experience in-house. That got him to take it. Second thing? Modernize the whole damn place. The previous owners had been dragging their feet on upgrading equipment, running on outdated systems from the 90s. I pumped money into new machinery, better software, and improved safety measures. Morale went up, production increased, and so did profits. Within a year, my investment was already paying off. Life was solid. I had a career I actually cared about, people who respected me, a comfortable home, and absolutely no contact with the ones who had tried their hardest to break me. A perfect ending, right? Except life doesn't work like that. One Wednesday night, Emma called me, totally off schedule. The moment I heard her voice, I knew something was wrong. "Have you checked your email today?" she asked, sounding off. I hadn't. I'd been stuck in meetings all day. Pulled it up while we were on the phone and saw something from an email address I didn't recognize. When I opened it, my stomach dropped. After more than a decade of silence, my mother had somehow found my work email and sent me a message. Emma confirmed she'd gotten one too. "Give me a moment, and I'll tell you how I took revenge." "They're in trouble," Emma said. "Serious trouble. Turns out my parents hadn't just been struggling, they were drowning. Dad's business had finally gone under for good. The second mortgage they'd taken out years ago had come back to bite them, and now the house was weeks away from foreclosure. But the real kicker? They'd been gambling. And not just the occasional scratch-off tickets or weekend casino trips. We're talking full-blown, pawned mom's wedding ring kind of gambling. Apparently, they had convinced themselves that one big win would solve everything. And that's where Logan came in. My brother, 28 years old and still living at home, had managed to rack up serious debts with some very bad people. He'd maxed out my parents' credit cards, forged Dad's signature on some loan documents, and basically set fire to what little stability they had left. Now the whole house of cards had collapsed, and they were scrambling for a way out. The email was exactly what I expected, vague mentions of family emergencies and difficult times, without a shred of accountability. Not a single apology for abandoning me. Just the assumption that because we were blood, I'd drop everything and come running to bail them out. I deleted it without replying and told Emma I wasn't getting involved. She understood, but I could tell she was stressed. They were pressuring her to talk sense into me, since she was the only one still in contact with both sides. That night, I couldn't sleep, not because I felt guilty. I didn't owe them a damn thing. But because I kept thinking about how predictable this all was. This was the natural consequence of how they'd lived their lives. My dad spent years tearing me down while building Logan up as the golden child. And now? I was thriving while Logan had completely self-destructed and dragged them down with him. It was almost poetic. 3 days later, my work phone rang. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Ben? It's your mother." For a second, I just sat there, staring at my desk. I hadn't heard her voice in over a decade. It sounded older, more tired. But that same tone was still there, that fake sweetness she always used when she wanted something. It made my skin crawl. "How did you get this number?" I asked. She ignored the question entirely. Launched straight into some speech about how they were going through a rough time and needed to put the past behind us. Because, of course, family has to stick together. Classic manipulation. Trying to skip right over the part where they tossed me aside like garbage for 12 years. I let her talk. Didn't say a word. Partly because I was still processing that this was even happening, and partly because I knew the silence would drive her insane. My mother always hated silence. After a couple of minutes, she finally cut to the chase. They needed money. A lot of it. The house was going into foreclosure in 3 weeks, Dad's business was bankrupt, and Logan had made, her words, some poor decisions that had financial consequences. I almost laughed. When's the last time you called me, Mom? To check if I was okay? Or even just to see if I was still alive? She got defensive immediately. You know how your father is. He has his pride. And you weren't exactly reaching out either. Unbelievable. I was supposed to be the one reaching out? After they abandoned me? Their twisted logic never failed to amaze me. How much? I asked, just to see what they thought I was worth. We need $200,000 to clear everything up, she said, like she was asking to borrow $20. We can work out a payment plan, of course. Yeah, right. Like they'd ever pay back a dime. I told her I'd think about it and hung up. Then I called Emma. She confirmed everything Mom had said, but she also filled in the parts Mom conveniently left out, like how they had burned through their retirement fund at casinos. How Logan had stolen their credit cards to pay off some dangerous people. The situation was even worse than I'd thought. The next week, Mom called every day, each message more desperate than the last. Dad never called. Too proud, I guess. But Mom kept insisting that he was worried and wanted to make amends. I didn't believe it for a second. Finally, I decided to put an end to it. Told Mom to meet me at my office that Friday to discuss options. I had no intention of giving them money, but I wanted to see them face to face. Maybe I needed closure. Maybe I just wanted them to see how well I'd done without them. Either way, it was time to finish this. Friday came, and they showed up right on time. I watched them pull up in a beat-up old Buick from my office window. Dad looked thinner, his shoulders slumped in a way I'd never seen before. Mom's hair had gone completely gray. I had my assistant bring them to my office. The look on their faces when they saw me sitting behind that big desk. Almost worth all the shit they'd put me through. Dad's eyes darted around, taking in the framed awards, the city view, the sheer proof that I had built something real without them. Mom plastered on that fake smile, already calculating how much she could squeeze out of me. Ben, you look good, she started, syrupy sweet. We've thought about you so often. I didn't bother with small talk. Let's get to the point. You need $200,000 or you lose the house. Logan screwed up again, and now you're out of options. That about cover it? Dad finally spoke. The economy hit my business hard. We made some investments that didn't pan out. Couldn't even admit they had gambled it all away. Emma told me everything, I said. The casinos. Logan stealing your credit cards. The second mortgage. That shut them up for a second. Mom recovered first. Everyone makes mistakes. But we're family. Family helps each other through tough times. Funny, I said, I wasn't family when you left me in the woods with nothing but the clothes on my back. Or when Dad beat the hell out of me over a pair of work boots. Or when you hung up on me when I called for help. Dad's face went red. That was different. You needed to learn how to be a man. I leaned back in my chair. And what did Logan need to learn when you bailed him out after every DUI? After he stole from you? After he wrecked your truck? Silence. Just uncomfortable shifting in their chairs. All right, I said, calm as ever. You need $200,000 to save the house, right? I paused. Fine. I'll give you $400,000. $150,000 to save the house, plus another $100,000 for your retirement. They just sat there, stunned. Then my mother smiled. Ben, I knew you still cared about us. But I wasn't done. There's one condition. I'm going to leave you in the woods. If you can find your way out within 3 days, the money is yours. Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Then my father slammed his hand down on the desk. You ungrateful little bastard. This is how you treat your own parents. I just shrugged. Your call. No one's making you do anything. I signaled security to escort them out. Dad actually got up, face flushed an ugly shade of purple. You ungrateful little shit. After everything we did for you. I cut him off. You mean like charging me rent the second I turned 18 while Logan got to live there for free? Or maybe abandoning me in the woods? Or how about telling Mom to hang up whenever I called for help? That's what you mean by everything? Mom switched tactics. She went full waterworks, voice trembling with desperation. Ben, please. We're about to lose everything. Logan's in real trouble, serious trouble, with dangerous people. Another shrug. Your choice. No one's forcing you. I waved for security again, and this time, they were gone for good. I sat in my office for a long time after that, just thinking. Waiting for the guilt to hit. For any trace of regret. But there was nothing. Just a strange sense of closure, like I'd finally shut a door that should have been locked years ago. That night, I called Emma to fill her in. She wasn't shocked. Saw that coming, she said. They'd rather lose everything than admit they were ever wrong. A year has passed since then. Work's going great. Haven't heard a peep from them. Though sometimes, news finds its way to me. Whenever Emma visits, we grab coffee, and one day, she mentioned they'd lost everything. I didn't ask for details. Didn't care. Do I feel bad about how things turned out for them? Not in the slightest. They made their choices. I made mine. They threw me away, expecting me to crash and burn. Instead, I built something better than they ever had. The real karma isn't taking something from them, it's succeeding so completely that they have to live with what they lost. Some bridges stay burned for a reason. And that's it.